Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pondcast. I am Anthony, and I'm here with Amanda and Steve. Say hi, guys.
Hello, everyone.
Waiting for you, Steve.
I waved.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you wave. Nobody sees it because you're just in the little, box down below. If Amanda's talking and saying an excited hello to everyone, and you're just waving, then nobody even sees you.
I was trying to be nonchalant.
We weren't trying
Well,
to spotlight it.
I blew it. I blew your nonchalant approach. Well, anyway, gang, we want to get right into it tonight. We are very excited to be with you here on the World Wide Web, the worldwide interwebs. And we first wanted to share a story of an ex-turtle poacher who won an award, who's been turned into a eco warrior. Really cool.
You didn't win the award for coaching.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. That's very important to bring up for sure.
I love
So,
this.
yeah, this is just the coolest. It absolutely is.
Really.
So, I can't read it now. That's too small, and I'm not going to remember his name.
You can't pronounce his name anyway, Anthony.
Makotikoti?
Makotikoti. So, Mr. Z here was a turtle poacher with a particular set of skills, just like our friend in the movie Taken. So, obviously, those skills could have been used to exploit the animals, like so many people do. If there's money and you can, take care of your family, you're going to go and do what you got to do, right? So, why not? How ingenious is this? Why not take some funds, take some resources, and bring them right over to the poachers and turn the poacher into a hero? Use those skills, Isn't it great?
No, it really is because, I think the biggest thing that people aren't really realizing about this poaching crisis that's kind of just taking place across the world with not only turtles, but of course, as we know, elephants, rhinos, gorillas, all of these species are just absolutely disappearing because of poachers, and it just completely villainizes poachers. And it's not to say that poachers are these misunderstood people. In many cases, they are absolutely uninterested in conservation. But in many cases, they are just people trying to feed their families, trying to make a living. And in their culture, they weren't brought up with this strong sense of stewardship towards the environment. They were brought up with this, we need to learn how to survive. So this story humanizes a poacher and says, there is this, this potential for this person to turn their life around. And more importantly, I think a lot of people say, oh, we need to eliminate these poachers. We need to absolutely, we have to stop poaching. Sometimes the only option is to give these poachers another means of, and you can't just take these people away. You need to be able to replace poaching with something else. And this is a great example of doing that, So I absolutely love this story.
I totally agree. And another thing to keep in mind is that when the animals are first being poached, they're being collected and they're being sold for really small amounts of money, and that's pretty much standard across the board. And then they're going through middleman after middleman after middleman before actually reaching their destination. So it's really not that much to pay someone to. I think Steve brought up from Peter Pritchard's most recent book, where he basically just shares his memoirs and his experiences, Tales from the Tibet, where he would pay local poachers or local villagers basically like double what they were getting for selling the eggs to bring the animals to him, or to show him where the nests were so he could protect them, or what have you. So it makes perfect sense. And actually, this is really interesting. I had a little thought, so I'm going to make an analogy very quickly, so please bear with me for a moment. One of my first jobs out of college, I wanted to be a police officer really badly for a while when I was in shape, and many moons ago now. but I got a job as an undercover operative for Macy's, with like the big department store. So I worked in their big warehouse, and my job was to basically make friends with people and um, and basically figure out from the inside who was stealing, because a lot of people steal from those jobs, right? Well, needless to say, I was horrible at that job. Number one, because I'm 6'9" and stick out like a sore thumb no matter where I am. And number two is because I had a college. I was the only person there with a college degree, and I just, for every reason, I just stuck out like a sore thumb, and nobody really got close to me. So if you think of like taking, just as an example, because obviously I think with tunnel vision because I'm an American, but if you take like an American conservationist and throw them in the African wilderness to protect a species, how successful do you think they would be as compared to somebody who's actually grown up there, knows all the people around, knows the lingo, and knows how to get in with people, and has some, local pull, for lack of a better term, to actually have some influence on the ground and make some things happen, and maybe start to educate people about stuff. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, it's, and sometimes when we go in and try, us being like conservationists, scientists, stuff like that, these people very often feel like we're belittling them, like we don't understand their struggle, and in many ways that we don't, we don't understand, because a lot of us are brought up with this strong, sense of stewardship and sense of, protecting the environment, but that's not a part of their culture. So they, it's very easy to feel, offended if somebody's coming into your culture and telling you that what you're doing is wrong by just trying to make money, because they don't see animals sometimes the same way that we do. And so, yeah, it's important for that a person from that culture to start realizing the value of these animals or doing something differently. And more importantly, I think it's great that he was recognized with an award, to show you don't have to be a scientist, you don't have to be this, this PhD, this college graduate to get this award. You can just care about the environment and make a conscious effort and be recognized in the same way that a scientist or anybody else would be. I love that.
Me too. Oh, I just feel good about it.
Yeah, for once, a good story in the news.
Yeah, it just makes me want to sit here and be happy.
Yeah,
But the show must go on, as they say.
Yeah.
And actually, this was a good well, there was a moment where there was a good segue, but I've now ruined it. So anyway, we should get into our topic for the night, which is, and you were talking about how people feel about these animals, and that's where I was going to try to segue, and then obviously ruined it again. But so how we feel about our animals. I think that we all, I talk about this all the time. I'm a social worker, so I work with people who have like mental health diagnoses or substance use history, stuff like that. So they, and no matter what your diagnosis is, no matter what your personal history is, no matter what your educational background is, no matter what your socioeconomic status is, we're all different and we're all very individual. So even though we have this really quite odd hobby and interest in the world, every single one of us within that very niche, very niche group of people we're our own individual, and we bring our own kind of flavor to it. And we may think we have each other figured out, but really we can agree or disagree on every little sub issue that might come up. So I think a big one and a big starting place that is very widely debated, and this doesn't have to be who's right or wrong, but I do think that it makes a very good debate, and that is basically how we see our animals, and whether or not we should try to make sure that they're as tame as possible or kept as naturally as possible. And we brought this up before, so if you heard me talk about this before, you will hear my opinions again. If you haven't, but if you have, please bear with me on my side of it. But I thought it was a really important topic to bring up while we had Amanda here, because she has an expertise that goes far beyond turtles, which is obviously the forte of Steve and I. So to be able to talk about it a little differently, because I know snake people view the temperament of their animals in a different way than most turtle people, or most people who are really, really, really into turtles. So I guess if that's a good enough of an intro into this, how do you, and I don't mean to set you up, Amanda, without going further, but I also don't want to talk forever. So how do you view your animals as far as wanting them to be tame or not?
I'm so excited to talk about this. It's honestly such a great topic to bring up whenever we're talking about the captive keeping of animals. I think that is definitely, this is the first thing I say, definitely depends on the animal. But for the most part, I think that taming your animal is honestly, in many cases with many animals, and I'll bring up some great examples, it's absolutely vital to the quality of life of your animal. But it depends on what kind of animal. And I also think that it's different than anthropomorphizing your animal. I think that taming your animal and actually giving your animal human emotions, human qualities, treating it as though it has different needs than it really does. Like, oh, my animal likes when I read him bedtime stories. My animal likes when I talk to him while he eats, or he likes when I, call him this, or put a sweater on him, or likes this TV channel. Like, I've heard all these crazy things. And at the end of the day, we know deep down inside what the primal needs of our animals are, and we shouldn't, extend upon those needs that maybe a child or another human would have. That's very different than actually taming your animal. And so it's important to separate those two. And so when it comes to turtles, I think, yeah, we're kind of, hold on. Are we good?
No, we're good. We're good. Please continue. Continue.
Okay. So I think when it comes to turtles and tortoises, it can, it can be a situation where I think, Anthony, you wrote a really good article on just kind of leaving those types of animals alone. And I have a lot of types of animals that do best when you just kind of step away and give them this, pretty naturalistic enclosure where they have everything they need, giving them their food, the proper lighting and everything like that. But in the case of certainly snakes, like reticulated pythons, monitor lizards especially, those are animals that are going to have a bad quality of life if they fear humans, because there's a lot of human contact in the in raising those animals. And so when you have an animal that could be potentially dangerous but has the potential to be tamed, I've seen monitors that are completely, they're wild caught, they've never been worked with, they're not tamed, and they live a pretty, a life that, I would honestly rather see that animal living in the wild. Because when you have an animal in the wild, of course, that animal has an instinct of like, oh my gosh, that's a predator, I'm in fear of my life, I need to defend myself. And you start seeing, like a monitor lizard, for example, start huffing and puffing, just hyperventilating, getting whenever you're going in to feed them or clean their enclosure. And that's a really stressful life for that monitor. But if you take a tame monitor, that animal is going to see you come in, going to recognize you, going to realize that he doesn't live in the wild, he doesn't have to worry about predators, he doesn't have to worry about getting eaten. You are bringing him his food, you're going in, you are a part of his everyday life. And I see so much less stress from these animals. Same with reticulated pythons and other snakes of all different types. They start to recognize their routine, and they live a much less stressful life when they are tamed and when they're taught to recognize humans as a part of their life, and when that wild, instinct is actually taken out, and when they're taught to realize that they're in the wild and that we're not going to eat them. So it can go both ways, and I see people kind of coddling their animals and, doing too much with them. and stuff like that. And then in another sense, when I worked at the New England Aquarium, I worked with some marine mammals, like seals, and those guys were actually taught to partake in their own husbandry. So they were taught to open their mouth, they were taught to give their flippers to the vet, they were taught to take an injection, they were taught to just completely take part in their husbandry. It made it safer for the seals, safer for the keepers, and it made it a completely no-stress situation when those keepers would go in and work with those animals. So in many cases, taming an animal, to me, means not to teach it to juggle a ball on its nose or teach it to follow you around, but teach it that humans are a part of its life and that it no longer lives in the wild, and that humans are a positive aspect. Humans, mean food. Humans mean, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to sustain your life. When I'm doing something to you, that means I'm not trying to hurt you, but I'm going to make you feel better. And I've seen many animals realize this, learn this. I've seen monitors even just let somebody clip their nails completely, because even though it's uncomfortable for them, they know humans aren't going to hurt them. And I've seen it completely increase the quality of life for some animals. So I am big on taming animals that I think, do better with it. And I would love to hear you guys' opinions on this, especially because you have, mostly turtles and tortoises and stuff like that. So,
I'll share. Go ahead, Stevie. No? Was that just me? I can hear my echo. That's what it is. I'm embarrassed. Okay. So one question about this that I have after hearing your thoughts, which your thoughts are wonderful and are different than mine, which I think is great for the conversation. So I'll tell you my personal thoughts afterwards, and I'm actually going to try to have a turtle poop on me in a few minutes, so stay tuned for that. I'm really excited about it. Every time it's really difficult for when it comes time to weigh them, but I actually like when my turtles poop on me. I like when they try to bite me. Well, now I'm telling you my thoughts, which I said I wasn't going to. So let me get to this one thought. Maybe I'm just being a little philosophical or trying to play devil's advocate here or whatever, but conservation-wise, let's say, let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say you just take a species of turtle. I don't even know what. Let's say red ear sliders are endangered. And we all know that red ear sliders they're not endangered, but let's just say they were, and we all know how they get excited and they come up the side of the tank and start doing this fluttery thing when they want food and all of that. And let's also say that red ear sliders aren't as bulletproof as they are. They're a bad example because they're red ear sliders, but anyway, so let's say over time you have a zoo breeding program for them, and over the course of 40 years you're breeding them, and the ones that survive, that don't die, eventually you're selective breeding them because of the environment you have them in, because you're taming them. Even if you're not obviously they're not parents to their offspring. However, if the ones that keep surviving are the ones that do really well in those super captive, unnatural conditions, then eventually we are breeding the wildness out of them. I'm just wondering. I'm wondering, and then if we do so, and 40 years in now, all of a sudden we have this new race of turtles that kind of really aggressively swim at the side of the tank and are not scared of humans and all of that, then would we be able to return those animals to the wild, therefore making it an actual conservation project?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect point. I think one of the most important things to consider when you're talking about this is that ultimate goal of, are these ever going to end up becoming wild again? I think that you should treat wild animals that are meant for the wild, that are meant to be displayed in a wild enclosure. That means plenty of space, not a lot of contact with humans. That is 100% an important aspect of keeping those animals wild. But when that's an animal, again, like a pet water monitor, like a pet big snake, or these animals that are part of a breeding project that you're doing these crazy morphs with, those animals are never going to go back to the wild. And I've actually seen 4th generation water monitors hatch, and immediately, usually even the 3rd generation water monitors will hatch, and they'll have that instinct of like, oh my gosh, this thing's about to eat me. But the 4th generation, they will crawl right up your arm immediately and just be like, hello there, I have no fear whatsoever. And so you can see that very slow process of almost domestication of these animals losing that fear. The fear of humans, it can be dangerous for humans, it can be dangerous for the animal, it can be stressful for the animal, stressful for the human. But in the wild, it is necessary for animals to fear humans, because that's going to save their life. That's going to teach them to fear everything else that they should fear. So, an example of keeping animals wild that need to be wild. I've worked with lots of blanding turtles. And at the aquarium, we had 2 blanding turtles that were target trained. They were, that means that they go right up to a target and they hit it with their nose and they get food for that. And it teaches them to come up to a certain place to get fed. They were trained to partake in their own husbandry, and they were trained to completely be able to be picked up without freaking out. And so these were 2 animals that were never going to go back in the wild, never be bred. They were education animals. We did presentations with them. But we also had in a completely, is that a Blandings? Little juvenile. So cute. I love them so much. They're such a wonderful species. And, the big, goofy males that we had that were tame, they were just awesome. But then we had all these Head Start hatchlings. They were in a completely different room. They were much smaller than that little guy there. And we'd actually try to grow them up to that size over the course of only maybe 9 or 10 months, which is kind of cool. How old is that animal?
A lot older than 9 or 10 months.
Exactly.
This is going on 3 years, almost.
Wow.
a couple months shy of 3 years.
Yeah, it's funny because that's actually kind of the goal. We would always say we're trying to get them to that 3-year-old size, because it gives them a better chance of surviving when we do release them. But those would happen more quickly. Yeah, because we keep them awake over the winter. So we wouldn't hibernate the hatchlings, and we just feed them, a really pretty calorie heavy, lots of food and stuff like that. Try to get them nice and sizable for release. But those turtles were destined to be re-released because in Massachusetts, blanding turtles are endangered. So we were, helping this population. Those little turtles, they didn't see people. We would drop food in. We would leave them alone. They were not accustomed to people. So when you pick them up, you're going to have a turtle trying to get away, trying to bite you, trying to, completely scared of people. Because when we re-release them, and you have somebody canoeing, if they're coming up to the boat, you're like, oh God, feed me, and they're just so cute. People wouldn't be able to resist taking them home. So, and it's just dangerous for them. We just don't want them to lose their wild instincts. And we did that with the African penguins. Even though we've never released African penguins back in the wild, they are with the species survival plan, and there's not yet been anything implemented on how to release them back to the wild, but they're expected to go extinct in the wild in the next 10 years. So we're, of course, working towards that. So even though they're all captive, even though it would be so much easier for everybody to have tame penguins, they don't tame their penguins because they're part of species survival. We want to eventually, be bringing these animals back to the wild. So I think a lot of places do keep that in mind, and I think it's super important to keep in mind for sure. So you definitely are on, on point with your perspective on that for sure.
Well, I think that's a big reason why with the Turtle Room we did the conservation and education piece, and the education thing is something that we're really, really passionate about because it's something we can do. We can only breed so many animals, and only such a small fraction of those would ever go back. So what are we really doing here? And what's really needed? It's education. So I'll say my blandings. The reason why they're a little on the smaller side is I do cool them during the winter.
The breeding and everything,
Yeah.
You're not planning on re-releasing them or trying to, get them up to a certain weight by a certain time, and that's perfect.
Interesting. I was contacted by a zoo that is involved with head starting Pacific pond turtles, and they are having troubles with their turtles, and that's why I asked if you were growing them up quickly, and they think it might be because they're growing them up quickly to get them to a good size early, because in the same exact environment, the head-started turtles are then reach adulthood or subadulthood, and they're right alongside the wild turtles. And the ones that were head-started around 5, 6, 7 years of age end up getting this really bad ulcerative like shell rot, which is not there. There are no traces of anything when they release them. So they're thinking that the only difference is that they're growing up faster and they're growing up in a very clean environment during the head starting. So something about either of those two variables is causing them to be more prone to something that they normally have immunity to. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, they probably missed this critical period of immunization completely, and they just go right past it. It's crazy.
But they thought maybe that like the more accelerated growth, caused some kind of weakness in the keratin in the shell in certain areas or something that lets some kind of bacteria that they're normally immune to kind of wreak havoc and take the opportunity to and they're really bad. I had a couple in captivity that had it, and we have a couple YouTube videos that show it, and it's really gruesome stuff. It's really sad.
That's so sad, yeah, because they do their best, in a Head Start program. I've worked with several different species of Head Starts, and one of the things that you see in every one is that we want to make sure these turtles stay clean, that everything that they do stays with them, that nothing else goes in, because they never want to risk releasing something else into that habitat. So it's, you dip mats and gloves and this, that, and everything else. And that sterilization and being so careful and taking them out of the wild to help them. Sometimes backfires. We just have to keep on trying and learning, because I've seen super wonderful results with some Head Start programs. But that's really interesting. I'll have to read more about that. That's crazy.
I think one of the things that we're kind of, I don't know, coming to a conclusion of here, or something that hopefully our listeners are gathering here, is that the end purpose of the animals is important as to what kind of decisions we're making on the husbandry care, and whether we are trying to tame them or keep them wild. And so there really isn't a flat right or wrong answer that, never tame your animals. Because it's very valuable for an educational ambassador animal to kind of be engaged with the humans that the animal is is serving its purpose to educate. But at the same point, these animals that we want to Head Start, it's very important that they don't get comfortable with humans, and they don't get and so I think there's it can be an enlightening conversation, and kind of show the other aspects from that article we had shared on our blog a couple weeks ago, is that it really is very much end means make part of the decision. And if the animal isn't going to be headed back to the wild, there may not be a right or wrong answer as far as, do we keep it wild, do we tame it, etc. Absolutely.
Yeah, like a great example of just a stark difference in the personality of a turtle would be diamondback terrapins. I've worked with both captive diamondback terrapins and wild diamondback terrapins, and it's almost like day and night. The wild diamondback terrapins are some of the flightiest wild turtles I have ever worked with. If they see you crouching down in the bushes while they're laying eggs, they will drop the clutch and just take off. It's completely, they drop, they get egg bound, they stress out. So when we're trying to do these nest site evaluations, if we see a nesting female, we actually have to just turn around, because we could compromise that entire generation if she even catches a glimpse of us, because they're that flighty. But on the same note, if a terrapin is in human care for like 2 weeks and they start to learn that you mean food, they will follow you around the house if you put them down like a dog. And they'll beg every time you even come near the room. They'll be going towards you. They splash so much they blow their light bulbs out. They're the nuttiest puppy dogs of the turtle world, as you said last episode, ever before. But it's a stark difference from how they are in the wild. And if you put a terrapin that's been in human care back in the wild, that animal is gonna just it's just gonna be a disaster. It's gonna be walking up to the first human it sees trying to get food. instead of being, this flighty animal that it needs to be to survive. So absolutely. Oh, what do you got there?
Sorry,
Oh,
Steve. You know what that is?
It's Squeaks.
That's not Squeaks. That's the little one.
Oh, that's the little one. Oh, I can't think of its name right now. It's
Akashan.
yes.
oh my gosh.
Listen, which I think means, yeah. Well, here. So, first of all, a young female. Very excited about that. Almost positive, and looking a bit overweight, which is fine. But this turtle hates being handled. The species hates being handled, which is absolutely fine with me because I want them to breed, and they'll be more likely to breed when they are comfortable and in a natural state.
Absolutely.
So, of course, she's making me a liar right now because this turtle literally poops and pees on me. I was going to actually play a game where I said, okay, guys, time this. I'm going to pick this turtle up, and we'll see how long it takes for this turtle to poop on me. And when I was researching for the book that I wrote, the cane turtle in India, the researchers, it makes it really easy to get fecal samples because every time the wild turtles are just picked up for a second, they give you a fresh fecal sample immediately. And I couldn't help but read that and then think about their close cousins, the Okinawa or Ryukyu black-breasted leaf turtle, Geoemyda japonica, and think about how I honestly can't weigh them without having them defecate all over me. It's actually atrocious, but it has not gone to the bathroom on me. I even have a towel on my computer because I'm scared that it's going to make something happen. But I can explain it without actually showing you, and you get the gist that I like to be pooped on by my turtles.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that female Odoratus we pulled out of the lake last Friday musked on Eric right after he picked her up.
Right.
Basically just instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Human picks up wild musk turtle.
Or snapping turtle, oh my gosh, like pretty much every time. So funny. But yeah, I mean, that's their thing. Like, they gotta learn to protect themselves. It's the same with, I've seen a lot of like really tame snapping turtles, and it's crazy because, those turtles can't, they have to be able to defend themselves. Another really interesting point I wanted to bring up about monitors is that, I talk a lot about, your water, or any monitor, not just your water monitors, but any monitor, especially something that's going to get big and potentially dangerous. It's important to tame them if that's going to be a pet, even if you're going to breed them, again, because it keeps their stress level down. To have a monitor being stressed out when the human's trying to do something for it, it's just a stressful situation for that animal, stressful life. But I have also seen monitors, and this happens all the time, so it's important to do so much research and just really think about the captive life of the animal and what it means to tame them. Because a lot of tame monitors end up becoming obese because they are fed, a whole lot, probably more than, your average monitor is getting out in the wild, just like any captive animal. But they feel so relaxed, they feel so, just no reason for them to be flighty, no reason for them to hide or try to run away, but they're just laying around all day long. And they do end up putting a lot of weight on. I've seen a lot of really nice monitors that are supposed to be breeders become too lazy to even breed. So it's important, if you do, want to tame an animal, that you keep in mind that animal's energy level and that the amount of energy and food that animal's burning is going to significantly reduce. And you need to, actually take that taming and bring it and kind of turn it into enrichment and turn it into exercise. So I've seen a lot of people with their monitors, they're really tame, but then they end up, having them chase, a prey item around the house to get them their exercise or do something. They end up, having them climb and have to really, get that prey item to get that exercise that they need. So it can be actually detrimental to their life if they end up becoming too calm, and then they don't get any exercise and they end up becoming really overweight. So there's a lot more that you end up having to do to compensate for that animal losing its natural way of life and the ways that it naturally burns off its food and stuff like that. So that's a really good thing to keep in mind, is that you really kind of have to go that extra mile. It doesn't make your job easier to have a tame animal, and in many ways you really do have to make up for that in so many more kind of unnatural ways, like having your monitor chase something around the house or something like that. So yeah.
Right. So I wanted to go back to something I said earlier. I just want everyone to know that I don't dislike red ear sliders. Okay? I just want to make sure.
Spot for them.
Just, a little shout out to our friends, the old red ears, because it's not their fault.
Exactly.
It's humans' fault.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I see that all the time. That's a whole other topic of just like the villainization of invasives. Oh my gosh, people that are so cruel to cane toads. And again, we just have to remember that they have no idea they're an invasive species. They're just an animal trying to survive in a habitat that they don't know that they don't belong in. So who can do anything for trying to survive?
Somebody's been watching Steve Irwin reruns over here.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's pretty much like ingrained in my brain. I have a whole encyclopedia of Crocodile Hunter.
Yeah, the invasive episode was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with the cane toads.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it's important to think about this stuff, and I think this topic is a great one. I think you touched on something really interesting earlier, and I think that's another piece of it too. And I think I should give the disclaimer also that we all started somewhere, and that we need to respect those question askers, and maybe the new generation is a little less get the book on the subject and a little more, well, let me just go on Facebook and just ask the question without actually Googling something, which is an easy enough choice option in itself. But just to be patient, because I know I asked a lot of questions when I was first starting out. The Turtle Forum was basically a place that I grew up in a sense, and there were a lot of amazing people there who helped me so much. And so I think, as tough as it is now to have an email that it can be relatively full at times with people asking questions, I think it's really important to understand that this is a really big effort, the multifaceted effort of the conservation and the education and making sure animals are being kept properly and all of that type of stuff. So we really need everyone involved, even if they have different views, like I mentioned at the beginning of this topic. They are our allies. So we really need to make sure that we're working with them and helping them and taking our time and letting them take their time to figure it all out. It's just really important. The piece, though, that you said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm going to pass it over to you right now. The piece that you said that I was interested in when you were talking about the beginning is something that I wrote about in my article, too. And I want to be careful not to be rude, because we're all animal lovers here, and we're all in this together. Putting the sweaters on the tortoise, or the unnatural photo shoots, or the having your turtle sitting next to you on your favorite pillow while you watch your favorite show together, like you said. I will say one thing John did in college. John had a ball python that he used to put in, and John, of course, for anyone who doesn't know, is the co-host of the Pondcast, everyone's favorite 6'9" redhead, and he would put the ball python in his hood, because that's all we wore in college was hoodies basically every day, being in the Northeast, and it would basically come and stick its head out and just kind of hang out while he was like watching TV or playing video games or whatever lazy college people do. So what about that? Again, is this just like turtles being different than snakes, or what are your thoughts on that stuff? If we could just go into that a little bit more.
I think I think first and foremost, everything you said, it's just like, yes, absolutely. At the end of the day, we all just love animals, so we should just connect by that, and not only knowing that we're all here for the animals. When it comes to stuff like that, it depends on the animal. it depends on the signs that you're getting from the animal. You know, I hang out with my snakes all the time, and if they find a comfortable place in my shirt or, you know, next to me or around my neck, and they want to hang out for a minute, I know that my snake has every single, you know, or has the power, I guess I should say, to move if they don't want to be there and go somewhere else. And so, you know, if that snake, if I open the enclosure and my snake is like, oh, I would like to, you know, come out and explore, that doesn't necessarily mean that I could be like, oh, you're so cute, you want to come out and explore. But that snake really does want to utilize more space. And then they find a warm spot and they just kind of park it for a minute, then I can actually kind of indulge my own, you know, maybe selfishness and be like, I can spend time with an animal that I truly love. And we kind of are both winning because my animal's not trying to get away from me. And, you know, I'm not necessarily, you know, planning on breeding this animal. I'm not, and a lot of my animals are education animals or pets or this, that, and everything else. And so as long as you're not forcing your animal to do anything, as long as your animal is not giving you signs that indicate that this is not really what they want to do, as long as your animal is healthy, you know, some cases you've got an animal that's just really maybe overweight or not so healthy and might be kind of exhibiting this content behavior, but really it's actually just lethargic. So all of those things really put into account. You've got to really know your animal. And that is my answer to kind of everything. As long as you are able to explain the behavior of that animal based on your knowledge of the animal's life history, the animal's biology, the animal's, you know, everything about that, the way they behave in the wild, then I think that you can kind of make those things happen in a way that doesn't necessarily take that animal's behavior away from it. So yeah, that can be a thing for sure with snakes. Not so much with turtles. I've never really met a turtle that wanted to hang out with me, but it depends. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I see the difference between the different animals, and I don't know. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
So Steve, do you hang out with your turtles on the couch watching sports and stuff?
Well, since all of mine are in the living room and dining room, we hang out with them whenever we're watching television or eating dinner. So.
What are they like?
Bonsai, the four-eyed turtle, he absolutely loves people. So, I mean, he will ignore food because there's people nearby to pay attention to.
He is so photogenic. It's so funny. I totally, I don't think he ever personally told me that, but just seeing all of his photos where he's just looking right at the camera, you know, yeah. I was like, either that's a really lucky shot or that turtle's actually photogenic.
he's a freaking ham. But in some ways, it can be hard to get a picture of him for the same reason, because sometimes he just wants to scramble right over to the glass, and all of a sudden there goes the good picture shot. You know, so like in his case, he's not like, ooh, I'm jumping off the basking area because I'm scared. It's I'm jumping off the basking area because I'm gonna come over and say hi. Yeah. And so. You know, he's an absolute hoot, but we sit there and eat dinner, and he's over there splashing against the side of the tank, you know, because he's really just like, hey, what's up, people? And my wife loves that about him because she can interact with him, engage with him, and feed him by hand, and so that's one of the really exciting parts about him to her.
What's really funny about that is that I have a four-eyed turtle, same gender, same species, and twice the size, and that is the most skittish turtle I've ever had in my entire life. I can't get a single photo of it, and it's so wild that the exact same species for Steve is the biggest ham you'll ever see. So really, really interesting.
And that goes into like just a quick point about the individual animals. I think a lot of the time, as maybe like you're thinking with your scientist's mind, you think of these animals as, okay, well, in the wild, they exhibit this behavior, that behavior, and every other. But I've met an individual animal of every kind, an animal that I just can't wrap my mind around why that animal acts the way it does, and I just got to chalk it up to that is just the way they are. You know, I've had 2 green tree pythons now that are just absolutely fantastic animals. And for people who know green tree pythons, you know that they're not known for their personality. They're known to be really bitey. They're known to be just really nasty. They've got these really long teeth. They're very perch aggressive. They're very, very eager to feed. So they have a huge feeding response, and they're just not known to be a snake that you can handle. But both of mine now have just been fantastic. They've just been like, hi, like, and you think it's a different species, like you're getting this ball python vibe from a green tree python, and you just can't really explain it other than, either that animal's been handled its whole life or that's just the way they are. So, so sometimes you just gotta chalk it up to the individual's personality that animals can have.
Right, that makes a lot of sense for sure. Seen it firsthand.
Yep.
Well, you got to see Bonsai for the first time in a while last weekend, so.
Yeah, I missed him. We have a connection, and I think he missed me a lot. And it was mutual. We talked. We slept in the same room. So that means anything. Yeah.
That makes a lot.
Yeah, me and all 20 turtles or however many there are there.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So I think this has been a good topic, and I think that it's one that will not go away and that we will touch on again and again and probably soon. I think that, what's most important is being understanding and open and inviting as far as other people's opinions. There's no right or wrong way to do this stuff the vast majority of the time, and it's really just about supporting each other and educating others and sharing what you know, or being humble and understanding that someone else might have a little more experience, or someone might have a little less experience, but we're all in it together. And it's not a P-wording contest.
Yeah.
It's not a pissing contest.
Yeah, recent experiences reminds me. Anthony and I want to encourage all of you that when you think we've said something that might be a little funny, send us an email. All right? We love when you guys reach out to us. If you need us to clarify anything, if you want to ask questions, we're turtle nerds, and we'll talk and we'll hang out. And we can do that by email, so feel free to email us. We do respond. It may take a little bit sometimes because our emails inboxes get up to 1,000 messages before you think it's possible. But please, send us a note. We love to hear from you. We love to hear you say you love us. We even love when you say, "Hey, I love you guys, but I didn't like this," because we like to talk. We like to learn too, and so your opinions are valuable as well.
That's right. And I want to thank the wonderful and talented Amanda Savage for being on with us again. She is the absolute best. And we look forward to hopefully having her on again in the future, and we just appreciate her knowledge of animals and reptiles in general, and not just turtles. It's the best.
Well, guys, I've been watching you guys for so long for becoming a part of this, and I actually was just kind of picturing myself I'm in a podcast with Steve and Anthony from the Turtle Room, and I actually kind of work with these guys. So it's just an honor to be able to have you guys as a resource to go to. That I always email you my turtle questions, because even though I've been keeping them for years, I still have tons of questions for people who've been doing it longer. And I think it's the best resource that you can have. And that's why it is important to do your own research, but also make friends, find mentors that have been doing it for a really long time that can just kind of guide you and just be there to not only be your friend, but to also kind of give you pointers and stuff, because they've made those mistakes and they've been there, done that. So I'm always humbled to be with you guys and to be a part of this stuff, and to be able to educate people the same way that you guys do with the Turtle Room. So thank you for having me.
We started on a high note, and we're ending on a high note.
Absolutely.
So I want to wrap it up with that. That was so nice. And I want to say that this is the single most upset I've ever been about not being crapped on in my life. And I cannot believe that little turtle let me down. I thought I was going to get crapped on the air here, and it didn't happen. So anyway, besides that, everything was a complete positive. And with that, I think we can bid you adieu for tonight and hope to see you next time on the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.